I'm Darren Urban, joined with General Manager Steve Keim. Thanks for doing the annual Combine Chat. Congratulations, number one, on the new deal with Larry Fitzgerald and making sure he's going to be around for the future here. When you start looking at how these deals have to get done and hard choices to make, and it worked out in Larry's case, but in the past you had to part ways with Adrian Wilson. Emotionally, for you, what's that like? I mean, do you have to completely remove that? What's that like for you?
Yeah, no, that's the hardest part of the job, and to me, it is. The emotional attachment that you can have with some of these players is puts you in a difficult spot. But at the end of the day, you have to do, to me, what's right for the organization, for long-term health of not only the team but the salary cap situation, so you're not incurring dead money in the future. But this is a deal that will hopefully make Larry Fitzgerald retire a Cardinal, and it gives us some flexibility moving forward to be aggressive and proactive once free agency begins.
You've made a lot of hay the last couple of years with shorter term deals. 2 years ago was Carlos Dansby. This year was Antonio Cromartie, and I'm sure you're still hoping to retain Antonio if it works out, but it might not. He played at a very high level, and he might, like Carlos had, it might move him on to another team. How do you kind of approach that? Because I know a lot of fans are kind of like, oh, we got this guy, now we're going to lose him. How do you kind of look at that?
Well, I think that number one, they step in and they fill specific needs. Yet at the same time, to me, there's always some value to dangling that carrot, meaning that these players come in on a one-year deal and there's a lot of incentive. And when there's a lot of incentive, it a lot of times brings the best out of players. Sometimes guys can get complacent when they have long-term guaranteed deals, whereas when they know that the potential is out there and you dangle that carrot, you're going to get their best football.
You've talked a lot about trusting the film more than anything else when it comes to the draft. Is there any point where you come to the Combine and you see measurables of whatever it might be, and that overtakes some of what you see on film? Is there ever a point on that?
It's enticing because there's essentially two parts of the evaluation. You go out in the fall and you fall in love with these guys on tape, and then you have a tendency to then forget what you saw on tape and get enamored with the physical tools. I say this all the time to our scouts to try to keep things in perspective. Guys, at 1 o'clock on Sundays, we're not going to be running 3 cones on the field. It's you got to be able to play football first and foremost, and you have to be productive. Now, the necessary physical tools that these guys have to have are important, and just as important, they have to be able to learn it. They have to be able to process information because things happen so quickly on the field. And at the end of the day, we've talked about finding guys who love the game and are passionate about football.
When it comes to quarterbacks, and Logan Thomas is a great example of what you guys were looking at last year, where does the film come with what the potential might be to, hey, he might not have done exactly what we wanted on the field in college, but he's got the potential to be there? I mean, how do you evaluate that?
Well, supply and demand at that position is extremely difficult. It's, there's just not enough good quarterbacks out there. So to me, one of the philosophies that I think that we have is if you fall in love with a quarterback and he can be your franchise guy, you take him and don't look back. Take him in the first round and don't look back. But to me, the guys who are the 4 through 7 round type guys are the guys who have physical tools, or they may have some of the ingredients to be a good quarterback. They just have to be developed.
There's a lot of unknowns when you're drafting as late as you are in the first round. The question becomes, if a guy drops, a good player drops, a guy that you like drops, but he happens to be at a position of strength that you have, how do you look at him when he pops up on the board?
Well, I think this year is a perfect example because for example, if you were talking about a running back and you said, well, you have some depth at running back. Well, there's going to be injuries that incur during the season, and you just can't have enough good football players. So to me, you have to take the best player available, the guy who brings the most immediate impact to your organization. And because of injuries, because of contract issues, because of, from time to time, suspensions and all-field issues, those needs can change. So to me, you can never have enough good football players.
What does it take to find the guys with the right heart, with the right intangibles?
That's the hardest thing to read. And I say this all the time, that you can see a player's foot speed, his athleticism, his change of direction, his ball skills. But it's hard to read the heart and the mind, particularly with the limited amount of exposure we have with these guys. We only have 15 minutes to combine interview them. The league allots us 30 players to come in to get to know them after the combine process. So it's become where our scouts have to not only be good evaluators, they all have to be, somewhat FBI agents as well. They have to investigate. They got to get to know what makes these guys tick. They need to know the inside and out. They talk to not only the head coaches, the trainers, the secretaries at the schools. They want to know everything they can find out about these players.
You've obviously had a lot of hits in the draft. When you miss, or if there's a guy that you decided not to take and somebody else did and went on, I mean, do you guys go back and Monday morning quarterback yourself? Do you ever reassess as a quality control issue? I mean, does that happen, or do you just move on?
No,
because
absolutely, and that's the humbling process, that part of the process. I mean, you have to be honest with yourself. And I tell our scouts all the time, the only way you can grow as an evaluator is to look yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself, and ask yourself, why did I miss? What were the reasons that I missed on this particular player? And again, so many times it goes back to the inability to learn it, or they didn't love it, because at some point it's going to catch up to you. And if they can't learn it, then obviously coaches aren't going to trust them to put them on the field. And if they don't love it enough, then at some point, regardless of how talented you are, it's going to catch up with you.
When you go through either the free agent or draft process, do you ever refer to a guy who might have been a former teammate of whoever you might be looking at, whether it's a former pro teammate or somebody that played with him in college? Do you ever go to that well in terms of getting information and try and learn a little bit about the guy?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you leave no stone unturned. I mean, I think you have to not only talk to the people at the school, but I think it's good to talk to your own teammates. Find out what kind of teammate this young man would be in your locker room. Find out how hard he works in the offseason. And to get sometimes your player's perspective, it's a whole different deal. And it's really, I think it's a great part of the process. And we have so many guys that are football junkies, which is important. Guys like Larry Fitzgerald, guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Pat Peterson, guys who are always hitting me up about, hey, what about this guy? I like this guy. I played with this guy, and here's what he brings to the table. And to me, sometimes those pieces of information are invaluable. I mean, last year I had a great inside knowledge about Jared Veldier. Not only because Kevin Ross coached him in Oakland, but Carson played with him. So I had two different sets of perspective on Jared Veldier, which was extremely beneficial.
Well, we appreciate the time, Steve. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your time in Indianapolis. For Steve Keim, I'm Darren Urban. This has been the Combine Chat at azcardinals.com.